The prison visiting room smelled of disinfectant and broken dreams. Through the reinforced glass, Marcus Thompson stared at the newspaper clipping his visitor had brought. The headline read, "Dr. Keisha Williams wins Nobel Prize in Chemistry for revolutionary cancer treatment." The photograph showed a brilliant smile, the same smile he remembered from sophomore year chemistry class, the same girl whose homework he'd copied, the same girl whose test answers he'd stolen, the same girl who'd trusted him completely. Marcus's hands trembled as he looked at his own reflection in the glass. Orange jumpsuit, hollow eyes, a man who'd thrown away every opportunity life had given him. 23 years later, she was saving the world. He was serving 25 to life for armed robbery. How did two kids from the same high school, sitting in the same classroom, end up on such different paths? How did the cheater become the failure while the victim became a Nobel laureate? This is the story of choices, consequences, and the devastating power of taking shortcuts in life. If you're watching this story, thank you for being here. Stories like this need to be told, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen. Before we dive deeper into Marcus and Keisha's journey, please subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. Also, drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from. I love connecting with viewers from around the world. Now, let's go back to where it all began. September 1998, Lincoln High School in suburban Detroit. The halls buzzed with the energy of a new school year, but beneath the surface, the familiar divisions were already forming. Marcus Thompson walked through those halls like he owned them, quarterback of the football team, dating the head cheerleader, son of a successful businessman who owned 3 car dealerships in the area. At 17, Marcus had never faced a real consequence in his life. His father, Richard Thompson, had built an empire from nothing, and he made sure Marcus never forgot it. "Success is about taking what you want," Richard would tell his son over dinner in their sprawling suburban home. "Nice guys finish last, son. Remember that." Marcus absorbed these lessons like gospel, watching his father charm clients, intimidate competitors, and bend rules to his advantage. 3 lockers down from Marcus stood Keisha Williams, quietly organizing her textbooks with the precision of someone who understood that education was her only ticket out. Keisha lived in the Corktown projects with her grandmother, Mama Ruth, after her mother died in a car accident when Keisha was 12. Every morning, she rode 2 buses to get to Lincoln High, one of the better schools in the district, because Mama Ruth had fought the system to get her granddaughter enrolled there. "Baby girl," Mama Ruth would say every morning as Keisha left for school, "you got something special in that head of yours. Don't let nobody tell you different, and don't let nobody take it from you." Keisha carried those words with her through the hallways where she was often the only black face in advanced placement classes. The 2 worlds collided in Mr. Henderson's AP chemistry class. Marcus had signed up because he needed the credits to maintain his GPA for college scholarships. Keisha was there because chemistry made sense to her in a way that the chaos of her life never did. In the orderly world of elements and equations, everything had a place, everything had a purpose. From day one, it was clear who belonged in that classroom and who was just passing through. While Marcus charmed his way through lab partnerships and copied homework from whoever would let him, Keisha absorbed every lesson, asked thoughtful questions, and stayed after class to work on extra problems. Mr. Henderson noticed, the other students noticed, Marcus noticed too, but for all the wrong reasons. October brought the first major test of the semester, and with it, Marcus's first real academic challenge. Football practice was consuming his afternoons. His girlfriend was demanding more attention, and his father's pressure to maintain his grades was mounting. The night before the chemistry test, Marcus sat in his bedroom surrounded by textbooks that might as well have been written in a foreign language. He thought about Keisha, how she seemed to understand every concept effortlessly, how she always finished tests first while he struggled to answer even basic questions. An idea began forming in his mind, the kind of idea his father might call taking what you want. The next morning, Marcus arrived at school early and found Keisha in the library, doing last-minute review. He approached her with his most charming smile, the one that had gotten him out of trouble since elementary school. "Hey Keisha, mind if I sit here? I'm so nervous about this test." Keisha looked up surprised. Marcus had never spoken to her directly before, despite sitting 2 seats behind her in chemistry class. "Sure," she said cautiously. For the next 20 minutes, Marcus played the role of the struggling student seeking help. He asked Keisha to explain concepts he already understood, watched her work through practice problems, and memorized her methods. But more importantly, He watched her habits. He noticed how she organized her answer sheet, how she double-checked her work, how she held her paper at a specific angle that would make it easy for someone sitting behind her to see. During the test, Marcus executed his plan perfectly. Every time Keisha worked through a problem, he followed along, copying not just her answers but her methodology. When she went back to check her work, he did the same, making the same corrections she made. It was seamless, undetectable, and completely devastating to everything Keisha had worked for. The results came back a week later. Marcus 98%, Keisha 96%. She had made a small error in the final calculation of one problem, an error Marcus had copied and then corrected when he saw her fix it. Mr. Henderson announced the scores to the class, praising both students but giving special recognition to Marcus for his dramatic improvement. Marcus soaked up the praise while Keisha sat quietly, confused by how someone who had seemed so lost the day before could outperform her. As that afternoon, Marcus's father clapped him on the back and took him out for a celebration dinner. "I knew you had it in you, son. Sometimes you just need the right motivation." Marcus basked in his father's approval, the guilt of his cheating already fading into the background. But for Keisha, doubt crept in. Had she studied the wrong material? Was she not as smart as she thought? That night she stayed up until 2 a.m., reviewing her notes, trying to understand where she had gone wrong. Mama Ruth found her asleep at the kitchen table, surrounded by chemistry textbooks. "What's got you so worked up, baby girl?" Mama Ruth asked. "I don't know if I'm good enough, Mama Ruth. Maybe I don't belong in these classes." Her grandmother sat down beside her, taking Keisha's hands in her weathered ones. "Listen to me, child. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. Don't let one test make you forget who you are." But the seed of doubt had been planted, and Marcus was just getting started. As the semester progressed, Marcus's cheating became more sophisticated and more frequent. He developed a system: sit close enough to Keisha to see her work, arrive early to observe her study habits, and occasionally engage her in conversations that revealed her thinking process. He told himself he was just being strategic, just playing the game the way his father had taught him. The pattern repeated itself test after test. Marcus would score slightly higher than Keisha, earning praise from teachers and maintaining his position as one of the top students in the class. Meanwhile, Keisha's confidence began to erode. She was still performing well, but the constant second-guessing was taking its toll. November brought the district-wide science fair, and Mr. Henderson encouraged both Marcus and Keisha to participate. For Keisha, it was an opportunity to prove to herself that she belonged. She threw herself into her project, investigating the potential of certain plant compounds to inhibit cancer cell growth. It was ambitious, complex, and entirely her own work. Marcus, meanwhile, was struggling. His father expected him to win the science fair, just as he expected Marcus to excel in everything else. The pressure was mounting, and Marcus's usual shortcuts weren't available for an original research project. That's when he remembered his father's business partner, Dr. Sarah Chen, who worked at a pharmaceutical research lab. "I need help with my science fair project," Marcus told Dr. Chen during a family dinner party. "It's about cancer research." Dr. Chen, impressed by Marcus's apparent interest in her field, began sharing her own research. She showed him data, explained methodologies, and even offered to let him use some of her preliminary findings as the basis for his project. Marcus absorbed it all, presenting Dr. Chen's work as his own innovation. The night before the science fair, Marcus felt confident. He had professional-level research, sophisticated data, and presentation skills honed by years of charm and privilege. Keisha, working with limited resources and relying solely on her own ingenuity, had produced something smaller but entirely authentic. The judging began early Saturday morning. Marcus presented first, delivering a polished presentation about his cancer research. The judges were impressed by the sophistication of his work, the depth of his data, and his confident delivery. When asked technical questions, he deflected smoothly, having memorized Dr. Chen's explanations. Keisha presented her project with quiet passion, explaining every detail of her methodology, every challenge she had overcome, every small breakthrough she had achieved. Her presentation lacked the polish of Marcus's, but it radiated authenticity and genuine understanding. When the results were announced, Marcus took first place. Keisha came in third. The local newspaper ran a story about Marcus's victory, complete with a photo of him shaking hands with the judges. His father beamed with pride, already planning how to leverage this success for college applications. But something unexpected happened during the awards ceremony. Dr. Janet Morrison, one of the judges who worked at the University of Michigan's Cancer Research Center, approached Keisha after the ceremony. "I was very impressed by your project," Dr. Morrison said. "Your methodology was sound, and your conclusions were insightful. Have you considered pursuing cancer research as a career?" For the first time in months, Keisha felt a spark of hope. "I'd love to, but I don't know if I'm good enough." "Young lady," Dr. Morrison said firmly, "you have something that can't be taught: genuine scientific curiosity and rigorous thinking. Don't let anyone tell you you're not good enough." Dr. Morrison handed Keisha her business card. "Call me when you're ready to apply to colleges. I'd be happy to help you find research opportunities." That night, while Marcus celebrated his victory at an expensive restaurant with his family, Keisha sat in her small bedroom, turning Dr. Morrison's business card over in her hands. For the first time since the cheating began, she felt like maybe she did belong in the world of science after all. Senior year brought new pressures and new opportunities for both Marcus and Keisha. College applications were due, and the stakes had never been higher. Marcus's cheating had become so routine that he barely thought about it anymore. It was just part of his strategy, like studying game film for football or charming teachers for better grades. The final chemistry exam was scheduled for December 15th, worth 30% of their grade and crucial for college applications. Marcus had already been accepted to several prestigious universities, largely on the strength of his academic excellence in science. One more strong performance would secure his position as valedictorian and guarantee his acceptance to his father's alma mater, Harvard. Keisha, meanwhile, had been working with Dr. Morrison on her college applications. The University of Michigan had offered her a full scholarship, and several other schools were showing interest, but everything depended on maintaining her GPA through the final semester. The night before the exam, Marcus felt more confident than ever. He had perfected his cheating technique over the course of 2 years, and Keisha's patterns were as familiar to him as his own playbook. He went to bed early, satisfied that tomorrow would be just another easy victory. But Keisha couldn't sleep. Something had been bothering her all semester, a nagging feeling that she couldn't quite articulate. She had noticed Marcus's dramatic improvement in chemistry, how he always seemed to perform just slightly better than her despite showing no evidence of superior understanding in class discussions or lab work. At 2 a.m., Keisha was still awake, and the pieces finally clicked into place. She remembered Marcus's sudden interest in sitting near her. She remembered his nervous questions before that first test, followed by his inexplicably perfect performance. She remembered how his answers always seemed to follow the same logical progression as hers, including her initial mistakes and subsequent corrections. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Marcus had been cheating off her for 2 years. Every test, every quiz, every assignment where they had similar scores, he had been stealing her work and using it against her. Keisha's first impulse was to confront Marcus immediately, but something held her back. She thought about her grandmother's words about dignity and grace under pressure. She thought about Dr. Morrison's encouragement and the opportunities that lay ahead. She made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. The next morning, Keisha arrived at school with a plan. She took her usual seat in chemistry class, but this time she was acutely aware of Marcus sitting behind her. As Mr. Henderson distributed the exam papers, Keisha felt a strange sense of calm. She began working through the problems as usual, but with one crucial difference. For the first half of the exam, she deliberately wrote incorrect answers, making sure they were visible to Marcus. She watched his reflection in the window, confirming that he was copying her work just as she suspected. With 15 minutes left in the exam period, Keisha put the second phase of her plan into action. She realized her mistakes and began dramatically erasing and correcting her answers, making sure Marcus could see every change. She wrote the correct solutions with obvious relief, as if she had just caught a series of careless errors. But Marcus, focused on copying rather than understanding, had missed something crucial. In his haste to keep up with Keisha's corrections, he had only copied some of them. His answer sheet was a hodgepodge of wrong answers, half corrections, and confused calculations that made no mathematical sense. When the time was called, Keisha handed in her paper with quiet confidence. Her answers were correct, her work was clear, and her conscience was finally at peace. Marcus, meanwhile, felt uneasy about the frantic last-minute changes, but assumed Keisha knew what she was doing. The results came back 3 days later. Keisha, 97%. Marcus, 23%. Mr. Henderson called Marcus to his desk after class, his face a mixture of confusion and concern. "Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Did you prepare for this exam?" Marcus's mind raced. He couldn't admit to cheating, but he also couldn't explain his catastrophic performance. "I studied really hard," he stammered. "I don't understand what happened." Mr. Henderson looked at Marcus's paper, then at Keisha's, then back at Marcus. The pattern was unmistakable to someone who knew what to look for. Partial answers that matched Keisha's incorrect initial work, corrections that made no sense, and a final score that revealed the truth about Marcus's actual understanding of chemistry. "Marcus," Mr. Henderson said quietly, "I think we need to have a conversation with the principal." The meeting in Principal Anderson's office was devastating in its quiet intensity. Mr. Henderson had spent the weekend analyzing 2 years' worth of test papers, and the evidence was overwhelming. Marcus's answers consistently followed Keisha's patterns, including her unique problem-solving methods and even her occasional calculation errors that she would later correct. Marcus's father, Richard Thompson, sat beside his son, his face growing redder with each piece of evidence presented. This wasn't the kind of problem that money or influence could make disappear. This was academic fraud, documented and undeniable. "I trusted you," Mr. Henderson said to Marcus, his disappointment evident. "I praised your improvement, recommended you for awards, wrote letters of recommendation for your college applications, and all of it was built on lies." Principal Anderson reviewed the evidence methodically. "Marcus, the pattern is clear. You've been systematically cheating for approximately 2 years, using Miss Williams' work to artificially inflate your grades. This isn't just academic dishonesty, it's theft of intellectual property." Richard Thompson tried to minimize the situation. "Boys will be boys," he said dismissively. "Marcus made some mistakes, but let's not ruin his future over a few test scores." But Principal Anderson wasn't having it. "Mr. Thompson, your son didn't make a few mistakes. He engaged in sustained, deliberate academic fraud that undermined the integrity of our entire system. There will be consequences." The consequences were swift and severe. Marcus's grades in chemistry were retroactively adjusted to reflect his actual knowledge, failing marks that dropped his GPA below the threshold for Harvard admission. Letters were sent to all the colleges that had accepted him, informing them of the academic dishonesty. Most rescinded their offers immediately. The local newspaper, which had celebrated Marcus's science fair victory 2 years earlier, now ran a different kind of story. "Local student expelled for cheating scandal," read the headline, accompanied by Marcus's senior portrait and a detailed account of his deception. For Marcus, the shame was overwhelming, but it was his father's reaction that cut deepest. Richard Thompson, the man who had taught his son that success was about taking what you want, was furious, not at the cheating but at getting caught. "You're weak," Richard told his son in the car ride home from the principal's office. "I taught you to be strong, to take opportunities, and you couldn't even do that right. You got sloppy, and now you've embarrassed our entire family." Marcus realized in that moment that his father had never cared about his character or his actual achievements. Richard had only cared about the appearance of success, the bragging rights that came with having a brilliant son. The cheating wasn't a betrayal of his father's values. It was a perfect expression of them. Meanwhile, Keisha was processing her own complex emotions. She felt vindicated, but not victorious. There was no joy in watching Marcus's world crumble, only a deep sadness for what could have been if he had chosen a different path. Dr. Morrison called Keisha that evening, after hearing about the scandal. "I want you to know that what you did took tremendous courage," she said. "You stood up for integrity when it would have been easier to stay silent. That's the mark of a true scientist." Mama Ruth, ever wise, put the situation in perspective for her granddaughter. "Sometimes the hardest thing in life is watching someone destroy themselves, especially when you know they had the potential to be better. But you can't save people from their own choices. Baby girl, you can only make sure their choices don't destroy you too." As the school year ended, the paths of Marcus Thompson and Keisha Williams diverged completely. Keisha graduated as valedictorian, her authentic achievements finally recognized without the shadow of Marcus's stolen success. Marcus graduated barely, his future plans in ruins and his reputation destroyed. The years that followed revealed the true cost of their choices. Marcus, stripped of his college acceptances and facing legal consequences for academic fraud, found himself adrift in a world that no longer offered him easy shortcuts. His father, ashamed of the scandal and its impact on his business reputation, grew increasingly distant and critical. Without the structure of school or the prospect of college, Marcus began making increasingly desperate choices. He fell in with a crowd that promised easy money and quick solutions to his problems. The same mindset that had led him to cheat in chemistry class now led him to more serious crimes. His first arrest came 6 months after graduation: credit card fraud. His father's lawyer got him probation and community service. The second arrest, 2 years later, was for burglary. This time, a brief jail sentence and a wake-up call that Marcus ignored. By the time he was 25, Marcus had been in and out of the criminal justice system multiple times, each offense more serious than the last. The armed robbery that finally sent him to prison for 25 years was the culmination of a decade of bad choices. Marcus had tried to rob a convenience store, desperate for money to pay off gambling debts. The clerk, a young father working the night shift to support his family, was shot during the struggle for Marcus's gun. The man survived, but barely, and Marcus's life as a free man was over. Keisha, meanwhile, flourished at the University of Michigan. She threw herself into cancer research with Dr. Morrison, discovering that she had an intuitive understanding of molecular interactions that couldn't be taught. Her undergraduate thesis on plant-based compounds and their anti-cancer properties earned her recognition from the National Science Foundation. Graduate school at MIT followed, then postdoctoral work at Stanford, then her own research position at Johns Hopkins. Each step of her journey was built on the foundation of authentic achievement and genuine understanding that no one could steal from her. The breakthrough that would eventually earn her the Nobel Prize came during her 3rd year as a principal investigator. Working with a team of dedicated researchers, Keisha identified a novel pathway for targeting cancer stem cells, the stubborn population of cells that often survived traditional treatments and caused cancer recurrence. The research was painstaking, requiring years of careful experimentation and repeated failures. But Keisha had learned early in life that real achievement required persistence, integrity, and the willingness to face setbacks without taking shortcuts. Her discovery led to the development of a new class of cancer drugs that could eliminate tumors while preserving healthy tissue. Clinical trials showed unprecedented success rates, and pharmaceutical companies worldwide began developing treatments based on her research. But success didn't change who Keisha was at her core. She still called Mama Ruth every Sunday, still remembered where she came from, and still felt the weight of responsibility that came with her gifts. When the Nobel Prize Committee called to inform her of their decision, Keisha's first reaction wasn't celebration but reflection. She thought about all the people who had believed in her when she didn't believe in herself, all the mentors who had seen her potential when others saw only obstacles. She also thought about Marcus, wondering what had become of the boy who had once sat behind her in chemistry class. She had heard rumors over the years: arrests, prison, a life gone wrong. Part of her wondered if things might have been different, if she had confronted him earlier, if she had tried to help him find a better path. But she also understood that everyone has to choose their own way forward. Marcus had been given the same opportunities, the same teachers, the same chance to succeed through honest effort. His choices had led him to prison. Her choices had led her to Stockholm. The prison visiting room conversation that opened this story happened 3 weeks after the Nobel Prize announcement. Marcus had asked his lawyer to arrange the meeting, claiming he had information about an old case. But when the visitor arrived, it wasn't a law enforcement officer or a prosecutor. It was someone Marcus had never expected to see again. "Hello, Marcus," Keisha said quietly, sitting across from him in the sterile visiting room. Marcus couldn't speak for a long moment. The woman before him carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had found her place in the world. Her eyes held no anger, no desire for revenge, just a deep sadness for what had been lost. "I saw the news about your prize," Marcus finally managed to say. I needed to apologize?" Keisha asked gently. Marcus nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I stole from you, not just answers on tests, but opportunities, recognition, confidence. I took things that belonged to you and used them to build a lie about who I was." Keisha was quiet for a long moment. "Marcus, do you know what the hardest part was? It wasn't the cheating itself. It was watching you waste your potential. You were smart enough to succeed on your own, but you chose the easy path instead of the right one." "I know," Marcus whispered. "I know that now, but it's too late." "It's never too late to be honest," Keisha replied. "You can't change the past, but you can choose the past but you can choose how you face the future. They talked for another hour, two people whose lives had intersected briefly in high school and then followed radically different trajectories. Marcus told her about his regrets, his understanding of how his father's values had poisoned his thinking, his hope that maybe he could find some way to make amends from prison. Keisha listened without judgment, offering forgiveness not because Marcus deserved it, but because she refused to carry anger that would only diminish her own life. As she prepared to leave, Marcus asked one final question. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had made different choices? Keisha considered this carefully. I think about it sometimes, but I've learned that wondering about alternate paths is less important than making the most of the path we're actually on. You still have choices to make, Marcus. Even here, even now. Walking out of the prison that day, Keisha felt a sense of closure she hadn't expected. The boy who had tried to steal her future had ultimately only stolen from himself. Her achievements were built on a foundation of integrity that no one could undermine or take away. 6 months later, Marcus began volunteering as a tutor in the prison's education program, teaching basic math and reading to inmates working toward their GEDs. It was a small start, but it was honest work, the first truly authentic thing he had done since high school. Dr. Keisha Williams continued her research, mentoring young scientists and ensuring that her discoveries would benefit patients around the world. She established a scholarship fund for underrepresented students in STEM fields, making sure that financial circumstances wouldn't prevent talented young people from pursuing their dreams. The paths we choose in our youth don't have to define our entire lives, but they do shape the opportunities we'll have to make different choices later. Marcus learned this lesson too late to save his freedom, but not too late to save his soul. Keisha learned it just in time to build a life of purpose and meaning that no one could ever take away. In the end, the true measure of a person isn't how they handle success, but how they handle the moments when they think no one is watching, when they have the chance to take a shortcut that no one will ever discover. Character is what you do when you think you can get away with anything. Marcus thought he could get away with everything and lost it all. Keisha knew that real achievement comes only from authentic effort, and she gained everything that truly matters. Their story reminds us that in life, as in chemistry, the equations must balance. Shortcuts might seem to work in the short term, but the universe has a way of correcting false calculations, and the final results always reflect the truth of what we've actually put in. The choice is always ours. We can build our lives on the solid foundation of integrity, or we can construct elaborate lies that will inevitably collapse. Marcus and Keisha made their choices in a high school chemistry class 25 years ago. The consequences are still unfolding today.